Welcome to this deep dive where we take a stack of incredible source material, pull it apart, and extract the absolute most vital nuggets of insight just for you.
Absolutely.
Today, we are traveling back in time. Way back, we are heading to the ancient city of Babylon.
Dust, chariots, the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. We're walking its dusty streets, looking up at the towering, impenetrable walls of the king's palace, and unpacking the secrets hidden within a legendary text from the 1920s that has sold, well, over 2 million copies.
It's massive.
It is. We are looking at George S. Clason's The Richest Man in Babylon.
It truly is a remarkable piece of work. The framing of this text is entirely unique in the personal finance space.
Right.
It operates as a highly practical, almost mechanical financial guide, but it's completely disguised as a series of engaging ancient parables. We're placed right in the middle of ancient Babylon roughly 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, which sounds wild at first.
It does. But the mission of our deep dive today is to sift through the sand, look past the chariots and the togas, and extract the timeless, unchanging laws of money. Because, as the text argues, these financial laws are as universal and unchanging as the law of gravity.
I love that comparison.
Once you understand them, you can apply them directly to your own life today, no matter what the modern economy is doing.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the contrast here is just incredible to me. We have a book published in the 1920s telling stories set 6 millennia ago in the wealthiest city of the ancient world, and yet the advice is perfectly tailored to you, the listener, navigating your own modern financial struggles.
It really is.
It is mind-blowing how perfectly these ancient Babylonian problems map onto what we deal with every single month when we look at our banking apps. You read this and you realize human nature hasn't changed a single bit in 6,000 years.
What's fascinating here is the foundational premise the text establishes right from the start.
Right, about Babylon itself.
Yes. Babylon wasn't naturally rich. It wasn't sitting on a gold mine or a massive reserve of natural resources. Its people learned how to create wealth.
They had to figure it out.
Exactly. They studied it. They figured out the mechanics of acquisition. These ancient citizens faced the exact same struggles with spending, saving, and the temptation of temporary pleasures that you face today.
They were just as easily distracted as we are.
They were human. They made mistakes. But the ones who succeeded did so through a deliberate, structured education in the laws of gold.
And I think that's the perfect runway into our very first story, our first parable. It begins not with a king or a wealthy merchant, but with an everyday working man.
A very relatable guy.
Extremely relatable. A guy who has suddenly hit a massive psychological wall. You're reading this and you immediately think of the modern rat race or millennial burnout. We meet this character named Bansir.
Yes, Bansir. He is a chariot builder by trade.
Right. And what struck me in the source material is that he is thoroughly, completely discouraged. But it's not just a bad day at the office. This is a profound existential exhaustion. Can you set the scene of where we find him?
The text paints an incredibly vivid, almost oppressive picture. Bansir is sitting stolidly on the low walls surrounding his simple property.
Just staring into space.
Yeah. The hot tropical sun of the Euphrates Valley is beating down on him mercilessly. Sweat is literally forming on his brow and trickling down into the hairy jungle of his chest. He's just sitting there completely paralyzed, staring at an unfinished chariot in his open workshop.
And his wife is hovering, right?
Exactly. His wife keeps looking out the door at him with these furtive, nervous glances.
Oh, that unspoken pressure.
It's her way of silently reminding him that the meal bag is almost empty. He needs to be hammering, polishing, painting, and stretching leather over the wheel rims so he can deliver this chariot to his wealthy customer and actually get paid.
Because if he doesn't
finish the chariot, they don't eat. But he can't move. He is physically and emotionally drained.
Which is such a relatable modern feeling, that Sunday night dread or that Monday morning commute where you're sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic thinking, is this it? Is this all there is?
Yes, the treadmill.
Bansir is having that exact realization. He's sitting there and he's forced to watch the wealthy classes of Babylon parade by, the noisy chariots of the rich jostle the sandaled tradesmen and the barefoot beggars into the gutters. And it's in this moment of acute observation that his best friend arrives to kind of snap him out of it.
Enter Kobbi, the musician.
Best friend Kobbi.
Kobbi comes up, playing his lyre, and he acts as the catalyst for this whole epiphany. Kobbi gives Bansir this grand salute and then asks for a favor.
A tiny favor?
And the favor is so small it's almost heartbreaking given how hard these two men work. Kobbi wants to borrow a mere 2 shekels until after the nobleman's feast that night. 2 humble shekels.
And Bansir's response is incredibly revealing. He tells Kobbi that if he had 2 shekels, he wouldn't lend them to anyone, not even his best friend. Because those 2 shekels would be his entire fortune. And a man does not lend his entire fortune away.
Kobbi is shocked by this. He looks at this master chariot builder, a guy who works from dawn to dusk, and says, in essence, you have not 1 shekel, yet you sit like a statue. Where is your endless energy?
He's totally confused.
And that's when Bansir reveals what actually broke his spirit. He had a dream the night before.
Tell us about the dream, because this is the crux of his depression.
In this dream, Bansir wasn't a struggling tradesman. He was a man of immense means. He had a handsome purse hanging from his belt, heavy with coins.
The ultimate fantasy.
He was tossing shekels to beggars, buying finery for his wife with silver, and feeling completely secure with heavy pieces of gold. In the dream, his wife's face was free of wrinkles, glowing with the happiness of their early marriage. He felt powerful, secure, and at peace. But then he woke up. And the contrast between the dream of absolute abundance and the waking reality of an empty purse is what shatters his illusion.
When he woke up, he says this profound feeling of rebellion swept over him. He looks at Kobbi and articulates the core problem they are both facing. They have worked incredibly hard their whole lives. Bansir makes the finest chariots in Babylon. Kobbi is a master of the lyre. They have mastered their crafts. They have exhausted themselves with manual labor. And yet, what do they have to show for it?
Nothing.
Exactly. They are feeding their families sour goat's milk and hard porridge.
Bansir then points to this visual metaphor right in front of them that just hits so hard, especially when you think about the modern corporate ladder.
The water bearers.
Yes. He points down the narrow street to the endless line of half-naked, sweating water bearers working for the king. They are marching 5 abreast, bent under heavy goatskins of water, walking back and forth from the river to the hanging gardens, day after day, year after year.
Just a brutal existence.
They have beds of straw to sleep on, hard grain porridge to eat. And Bansir says to Kobbi, pity the poor brutes. Yet, how little better off are we, free men though we call ourselves?
They realize they are trapped in the exact same cycle. Working, 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 and getting absolutely nowhere. They aren't slaves in name, but they are slaves to the grind.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bansir and Kobbi are realizing that hard work alone is an illusion if it's not coupled with financial intelligence.
Right.
This is the crucial why of their situation. They assumed, like so many people today assume, that if they just worked hard, kept their heads down, and perfected their daily labor, the gods or the economy or their employer would eventually recognize their worthy deeds and bestow prosperity upon them.
But wealth doesn't work that way.
No, it's a mechanical process, not a divine reward for sweat.
And here is the absolute aha moment of this entire section. Kobbi has this flash of insight. He says, we never found any measure of wealth because we never sought it. I want you listening right now to really hear that. We never found wealth because we never sought it.
It's a devastatingly simple truth.
Exactly. Kobbi realizes they devoted all their best endeavors to building staunch chariots and playing beautiful music, and at those things, they succeeded.
They did.
They became masters of their specific domains, but they never actually studied how to acquire gold. So I have to ask you, the listener, how often do you focus so much on being incredibly good at your job, at answering emails, at meeting deadlines, at getting that next promotion, that you completely forget to study how to actually build wealth from the earnings you make?
It's a profound psychological shift. It would have been very easy for Bansir and Kobbi to become resentful. That is the default human reaction.
Very true.
They could have looked at the passing chariots and cursed the wealthy, cursed the king, or cursed the economic system of Babylon. They could have demanded that wealth be redistributed to them because they worked hard.
Which happens all the time today.
Constantly. But they don't do that. Instead, they take extreme ownership of their ignorance. They realize they simply lack the specific knowledge of wealth creation. So they decide to seek out someone who has that knowledge. They remember their old childhood friend, Arkad.
Arkad, the man who rides in a golden chariot but still waves and smiles at his old friends. The man who is universally known as the richest man in all of Babylon.
The guy they grew up with.
Right. So rich that even the king seeks his aid in treasury affairs. Bansir and Kobbi decide that they're going to go to Arkad, swallow their pride, and ask him for his secret. Which leads us into our next section, unpacking the foundation of wealth itself. Because how did a regular kid from their exact same neighborhood become the wealthiest man in the city?
When they approach Arkad, they bring up the very things we just discussed. They point out that they all studied under the same master, played the same games as children.
They had the exact same starting line.
Yes, Arkad was no smarter than them, no more honorable, and he didn't work any harder. They ask him why a fickle fate singled him out to enjoy the good things in life while they were left behind.
I love how Arkad handles this, because he immediately bursts their bubble.
He does. He completely rejects the premise of their question. He corrects them, saying that fickle fate is a vicious goddess who brings ruin to almost every man she showers with unearned gold.
Think about modern lottery winners or heirs to massive fortunes who go bankrupt within a decade.
Precisely. Arkad tells them that unearned wealth turns people into wanton spenders who quickly lose it all, or fearful misers who hoard it, terrified of losing what they don't know how to replace.
Because they don't have the mechanics down.
Right. He tells his old friends his wealth is not luck. It's the result of studying and applying specific laws.
And Arkad's backstory is so relatable. He didn't start out rich. He started out as a lowly scribe in the Hall of Records. Now, a scribe in ancient Babylon wasn't a glamorous job.
Far from it.
He spent his days hunched over, carving records into wet clay tablets for a few coppers a day. It was monotonous, back-breaking work. He worked week after week, month after month, and had absolutely nothing to show for it. Food, clothing, penance to the gods, it ate up everything he made.
But he had this fierce determination to figure out how wealth worked.
Yes, he did.
His opportunity came in the form of a man named Algamish, a wealthy moneylender who came to the Hall of Records. Algamish needed a copy of the Ninth Law carved into clay overnight.
A rush job.
Exactly. Now, Arkad saw his opening. He made a bold bargain. He told the moneylender that he would stay up all night carving the law, if in return, Algamish would teach him the secret to wealth.
And Arkad actually follows through. He works all night. The text says his back is aching, his head is pounding from the smell of the lamp wick, his eyes are straining in the dim light. But at sunup, the tablets are done.
He delivered.
Algamish returns, and Arkad demands his payment. Tell us what Algamish says, because this is the foundational rule of the entire book.
Algamish smiles and delivers the secret. He says, I found the road to wealth when I decided that a part of all I earned was mine to keep. And so will you.
A part of all I earn is mine to keep.
Yes. He tells Arkad that it should be not less than 1/10 of his earnings, no matter how little he makes.
Now, hold on. Let me jump in and play devil's advocate here on behalf of the listener. Because when you hear that, save 10% of what you earn, it sounds almost patronizingly simple.
It does.
And frankly, if someone is living paycheck to paycheck today and 100% of their income barely covers rent, groceries, and utilities, isn't telling them to just save 10% a bit tone deaf, does the text actually justify how someone with nothing is supposed to do this?
That is exactly the pushback Arkad gives to Algamish. Arkad scoffs at it.
Yeah.
He says, but all I earn is mine to keep, is it not? And Algamish delivers a masterclass in financial reality. He points out that Arkad pays the garment maker, he pays the sandal maker, he pays the food vendor. Algamish says, fool, you pay to everyone but yourself. You labor for others. This is a massive paradigm shift. Algamish makes Arkad realize that if you spend everything you earn just to survive, you are essentially a slave working just for what your master gives you to eat and wear.
You're just a conduit for money to pass through to other businesses.
Precisely. The true foundation of wealth is establishing that the very first person you pay, before the grocer, before the landlord, before the tailor, is yourself. You pay yourself your 10% and you force yourself to live on the remaining 90%. And what Algamish points out, and what behavioral economics proves today, is that your lifestyle will adapt to the 90% just as easily as it adapted to the 100%.
That reframing is powerful.
Yeah.
You aren't saving money. You are paying yourself so you don't remain a slave to everyone else you buy things from. So Arkad decides to try it. He starts hiding away 1 out of every 10 copper pieces he earns. And he notices that exact psychological phenomenon. He gets along just fine without it. He doesn't starve. The human mind simply adapts to the constraint.
It's remarkable.
But, of course, the path to wealth is rarely a straight line. Once he saves the money, he makes a catastrophic error.
Yes, the text gives us this hilariously bad first attempt at investing. A year passes, and Algamish comes back to check on him. He asks Arkad if he saved his 10th. Arkad proudly says yes. Then Algamish asks the critical follow-up question, what did you do with the savings?
And Arkad says, oh, I gave it to Asmer, the brickmaker. He's traveling over the seas to Tyre to buy rare Phoenician jewels for us to flip.
The reaction from Algamish is brilliant. He growls at the youth. He asks, would you go to the bread maker to inquire about the stars? No, you would go to the astrologer.
All right.
He immediately diagnoses the fatal flaw in Arkad's thinking. Arkad trusted the knowledge of a brickmaker regarding rare jewels. He fell victim to the Dunning-Kruger effect of early investing, thinking that because you successfully save money, you suddenly know how to invest it, or that your friends know how to invest it.
And of course, as the text reveals, the Phoenicians were scoundrels who sold the brickmaker worthless bits of glass. Arkad's entire year of savings, his newly planted tree of wealth, was jerked up by the roots.
Gone in an instant.
It's the ultimate folly of youth. It's like taking your first $10,000 in savings and dumping it into a meme stock or a sketchy crypto coin because your buddy who works in HR said it was a sure thing.
Exactly. But the crucial thing is that Arkad doesn't quit. He learns the lesson. He starts saving his 10th again. Another year passes. Algamish returns and asks for an update. This time, Arkad says he loaned his savings to Agar, a shield maker, to buy bronze, and Agar is paying him a healthy rental interest every 4th month.
Okay, much better investment. He's funding a legitimate business run by an expert in that field, but he still messes up, doesn't he?
He does. Algamish approves of the investment, but then asks Arkad what he is doing with the interest he's earning. And Arkad proudly declares that he is throwing great feasts with honey and wine and spice cake, and he even bought himself a scarlet tunic.
Which is the ancient Babylonian equivalent of buying a luxury car with your first dividend payout.
Precisely. And once again, Algamish rebukes him. He laughs and says, you do eat the children of your savings. Then how do you expect them to work for you? This introduces the concept of compound interest. But it doesn't do it with abstract math. It does it in a very visceral, behavioral way.
Right, because we all know how compound interest works mathematically. That's Finance 101. But what the text highlights so brilliantly here is the behavioral trap.
The temptation to experience lifestyle creep. The initial savings you put away are your golden slaves. The interest those savings earn are the children of those slaves. If you immediately spend the interest on luxuries like feasts and tunics, you are eating the children before they can grow up and work for you.
You just kill the momentum.
You are stopping the compounding process in its tracks. You have to build an army of golden slaves first. You let the children have children and those children have children before you can finally enjoy the rich banquets without regret.
There is a concept that comes up during Arkad's story that I really want to touch on, which is willpower. When Arkad's friends hear the story, they tell him, wow, you had incredibly strong willpower to keep going after losing your first entire year's savings. And Arkad completely rejects their definition of the word.
He shuts it down immediately. He says willpower isn't some superhuman mystical strength that lets you lift a burden a camel can't carry. Willpower is simply the unflinching purpose to finish a task once you set it. It is about consistency, not intensity.
The analogy he uses is so sticky. He says if he makes a rule for himself that for 100 days, as he walks across the bridge into the city, he will pick a pebble from the road and cast it into the stream, he will do exactly that. If on the 7th day he forgets, he won't just say, oh, tomorrow I'll throw 2 pebbles to make up for it. No, he will literally retrace his steps and throw the pebble for that day. Nor will he get to the 20th day, get bored and say, this is useless, I'll just throw a handful and now and be done with it. It is about absolute unbending consistency in small daily habits. That is true willpower.
Which is the exact mindset required for long-term investing. It's dollar-cost averaging. It's putting that money into the market every single month, regardless of whether you feel like it, regardless of whether the market is up or down, without trying to gamify the system.
So Arkad masters these laws. He learns to save, he learns to seek competent advice rather than trusting brickmakers with jewels, and he learns to make his gold multiply without eating the children of his savings. Eventually, Algamish recognizes his discipline and makes him a partner in his estate, and Arkad builds his massive legendary fortune.
The richest man in Babylon.
Exactly, but now the deep dive takes a fascinating turn. We transition from Arkad's personal success story to a massive macroeconomic crisis hitting the entirety of Babylon. The king himself has to step in.
Yes, the perspective shifts to King Sargon. He returns to Babylon after defeating his enemies in battle, and his chancellor hits him with terrible news on the home front.
Trouble at home.
Big trouble. The city is facing a severe economic depression. Earlier in his reign, the king had funded massive public works, great irrigation canals, mighty temples, towering walls. But now that those monumental projects are finished, the economy has stalled. The laborers have no work, the merchants have no customers to buy their goods, the farmers can't sell their produce, the common people have no gold to buy food.
The king is totally baffled by this. He asked the chancellor, "Where has all the gold gone that we spent for these great improvements? We injected massive amounts of capital into the economy."
And the chancellor explains the harsh reality of free markets. He says that the gold all funneled into the hands of a few very rich men. It slipped through the fingers of the common people like goat's milk through a strainer. Because the common people didn't understand how to keep wealth, it naturally flowed back to the individuals who understood the laws of money.
Now, what happens next is a really remarkable public policy decision, especially for an ancient absolute monarch. A lesser king might have just ordered the wealthy men's assets seized and redistributed.
The king, to his credit, realizes that you can't just take the wealth away from the men who fairly earned it just because they knew how to build it. That would destroy the incentive structure of the entire society. Instead, he decides that the root cause of the poverty is ignorance. So his solution is education. He wants all the people to learn how to accumulate gold themselves.
He essentially invents public financial literacy. He summons Arkad, the richest man in the city, and drafts him to become Babylon's lead financial educator. He commands Arkad to teach a class of 100 men in the Great Hall of the Temple of Learning. The king's vision is to build a school for teachers who will then go out and teach these laws to every worthy subject in his domain until everyone in Babylon knows how to build wealth.
And this brings us to the absolute meat of the source material. Arkad stands before these 100 men. They are sitting on colorful rings in a semicircle with a sacred lamp smoking on a tabouret beside him. He tells them he has found 7 remedies for a lean purse. Over 7 days, he teaches them the 7 cures.
We are going to break these 7 cures down thoroughly right now because they form the operational core of this entire book. So what does this all mean? Cure number 1 is start thy purse to fattening. This is the 10% rule we already touched on with Ilgamish. But Arkad explains it beautifully to his students using a very practical analogy.
The egg merchant.
Right. He zeroes in on an egg merchant in the class and asks him a simple question. If you put 10 eggs in a basket every morning and take out 9 every evening, what will eventually happen?
The egg merchant answers correctly. It will become in time overflowing. Because each day you put in 1 more egg than you take out. It's inescapable math. Arkad tells the men to do the exact same thing with their coins. For every 10 coins they put in their purse, take out for use but 9.
It's so simple.
But Arkad doesn't just leave it at the math. He notes that strange psychological phenomenon again. When he started living on 9/10 of his income, he managed to get along just as well. He wasn't any shorter on funds than before.
Which leads directly into cure number 2, control thy expenditures. Because as soon as Arkad says you have to save 10%, a student in the room who makes a very low wage asks the exact same obvious question I asked you earlier. How can I save 1/10 when 100% of my earnings aren't enough to cover my necessary expenses? And how does Arkad respond to this guy?
Arkad's answer here is perhaps the most profound truth in the entire text. He says, what each of us calls our necessary expenses will always grow to equal our incomes unless we protest to the contrary.
Let me just repeat that because it is so vital. What we call our necessary expenses will always grow to equal our incomes unless we protest to the contrary. That is the definition of lifestyle creep.
Exactly. It's a timeless behavioral trap. You have to stop confusing your necessary expenses with your desires. All men, Arkad says, are burdened with more desires than they can gratify. Even the richest man in Babylon cannot gratify every desire because he is limited by time, strength, and the sheer capacity to enjoy.
I loved the pushback from the class here, too. There's actually a guy in the room wearing a robe of red and gold who stands up and rebels against this idea of controlling expenditures. He says he's a free man, and he refuses the slavery of a budget.
He hates the idea of a budget.
Completely. He thinks a budget will strip all the pleasure from his life and make him feel like a pack-ass carrying a heavy burden across the desert. He wants to spend his money how he pleases.
And Arkad brilliantly dismantles that argument. He asks the man, if a pack-ass were to budget his own burden, would he include jewels and rugs and heavy bars of gold? No, he would pack hay, grain, and water for the desert trail. Arkad explains that the budget is not a prison. It is a defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism.
Yes. It defends your most cherished desires from your casual, everyday wishes. It shows you the leaks in your purse so you can stop them. Think about modern subscription fatigue, people paying for 5 different streaming services they never watch. A budget illuminates that waste. You budget to ensure you have money for your absolute necessities, and then you use the remainder of that 90% to fund your most worthwhile enjoyments, ruthlessly crossing out the multitude of desires that must go unsatisfied.
So what does this all mean for the modern listener? It means write down everything you spend money on. Select what is absolutely necessary, keep the 10% safe, and ruthlessly cut the rest. You aren't restricting your freedom. You are prioritizing your actual values over impulsive spending.
Spot on.
Okay, moving on to cure 3. Make thy gold multiply. Your purse is fattening. You're living on a budget. Now you have to put that gold to work. As we learned with Arkad's feast, wealth isn't the coins sitting in your purse. Wealth is the income stream that flows into your purse whether you are working or traveling.
To illustrate this, Arkad tells the story of the farmer and his newborn son. This is a masterclass in the staggering power of compound interest over a long time horizon. The farmer takes 10 pieces of silver to the moneylender when his son is born. The moneylender agrees to pay a rental of 1/4 its value every 4 years.
A solid return.
But crucially, the farmer asks that the rental be added back to the principal. He doesn't take the payout.
He doesn't eat the children.
Exactly. When the boy is 20, the farmer checks in, and those 10 pieces of silver have grown to 30 1/2 pieces. The farmer is pleased, but he leaves it there. He lets the compounding continue. By the time the son is 50 years old, a span of half a century, the moneylender owes the son 167 pieces of silver. The initial investment multiplied itself almost 17 times over 50 years, purely through the compounding of interest.
It's the ultimate passive income. The coins are the slaves, and their children, and their children's children, all labor for the owner. But wait, because all those golden slaves can be wiped out in a single second, if you ignore Cure 4, guard thy treasures from loss. And this is where Arkad reminds the class of his humiliating mistake with Asmur the brickmaker and the fake Phoenician jewels. When you finally have a little bit of gold saved up, you are going to be tempted by opportunities that promise huge, rapid returns. Friends and relatives will pitch you plausible-sounding projects.
The first sound principle of investment, Arkad states, is security for your principal. It is foolish to be intrigued by larger earnings if the principal itself might be lost. The penalty for risk is probable loss. Before you loan money, you must assure yourself of the borrower's ability to repay, looking at their reputation and track record. Before you invest, you must acquaint yourself with the specific dangers of that asset class.
So no dropping your life savings into a speculative altcoin just because an influencer posted a rocket ship emoji on social media.
Precisely. Arkad advises the men to seek the wisdom of those experienced in the daily handling of money. He says their advice is freely given to those who ask, and it is worth the actual weight of the gold it saves you from losing.
Now, Cure 5 is very specific, and I'm curious if we think it holds up today. Cure 5 is, make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. Arkad talks about how many families in Babylon pay exacting landlords for tiny rooms where children have to play in unclean alleys and wives can't even grow a flower. He advocates heavily for owning your own home and land. But in today's market, with sky-high interest rates and massively inflated housing prices, does this ancient advice still apply? Is buying always better than renting?
It's an excellent question, and it's heavily debated in modern personal finance. Strictly from an ROI perspective, renting and investing the difference in the stock market can sometimes outpace the returns of buying a home, especially when you factor in property taxes, maintenance, and mortgage interest. However, Arkad's argument isn't purely mathematical, it's deeply psychological.
How so?
Arkad points out that a man's heart is gladdened when he can eat figs from his own trees and grapes from his own vines. Owning the roof that shelters your family puts confidence in your heart and greater effort behind your daily endeavors. It anchors you. And financially, he argues that instead of paying rent endlessly into a void, you pay the money lender for the home, and eventually the loan is satisfied.
Then you own it free and clear.
Right. Then your only cost is the king's taxes or property taxes today, which radically reduces your cost of living in your later years and frees up more earnings. It forces a kind of mandatory savings plan for people who might otherwise struggle to invest.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the ancient version of getting on the property ladder to lock in your long-term housing costs. Okay, Cure 6, ensure a future income. We are all walking a one-way path from childhood to old age. You have to prepare for the days when you're no longer young, and you have to protect your family in case the gods call you prematurely.
Arkad discusses a man named Anson, a sandal maker. Anson deposited just 2 pieces of silver with the moneylender every week for 8 years. When he finally checked the balance, the regular deposits plus the compound interest had swelled to over 1,000 pieces of silver. Arkad showed him the math. If he kept doing it for 12 more years, it would become 4,000 pieces of silver, a full competence for the rest of his life.
Arkad is basically describing an ancient retirement account, an ancient 401k or IRA. Small, regular deposits over time build an impenetrable financial fortress against the tragedies of aging and sudden death.
Yes. He also touches on the concept of life insurance, though obviously they didn't have actuarial tables back then. He suggests that men should figure out ways to pool their resources to provide for the widows and orphans of those who pass away unexpectedly.
And finally, cure 7, increase thy ability to earn. This cure is different from the others because it isn't about gold. It's about the man himself. It's about human capital. Arkad talks about a young man who came to him asking for a loan because his income couldn't cover his living expenses.
Arkad's response is great here.
Right. Arkad tells him point blank that he doesn't need a loan. He needs to earn more money. The young man complains that he has asked his master for a raise 6 times in 2 moons without any success.
It's a humorous moment, but Arkad uses it to explain a vital principle. Desire must be specific and tangible. Just desiring to be rich is a weak, nebulous longing. Desiring 5 pieces of gold is a tangible goal you can press to fulfillment. Once you learn how to secure 5, you'll learn how to secure 10, then 20. And to earn more, you must perfect your craft. You must upskill.
Arkad uses his own life as an example here. He noticed that when he was a scribe, other scribes carved more tablets and got paid more. He didn't complain that it was unfair. He decided to be exceeded by no one. He concentrated harder, he persisted longer, he studied their techniques, and his skill was eventually rewarded without him even having to ask his master for a raise 6 times. The more wisdom we know, the more we may earn.
He also adds a profound ethical component to this final cure. He says that to truly respect yourself and increase your capacity to earn, you must pay your debts promptly, care for your family so they speak well of you, make a will, and act with compassion toward those who are less fortunate. True wealth creation is tied to personal integrity.
So we have the 7 cures. Let's recap them quickly. Fatten your purse with the 10% rule. Control your budget by separating needs from desires. Multiply your gold through compound interest. Guard it from loss by avoiding schemes. Own your home to build confidence and equity. Ensure your future against old age, and increase your earning ability by upskilling.
The foundational blocks.
Exactly. They are the foundational mechanical steps of building wealth. But let's be honest. Even in ancient Babylon, people didn't just want mechanics. They wanted to know about that elusive, intangible force, luck. They wanted to know how to get lucky. Which brings us to section 4, demystifying the goddess of good luck.
This section takes place back in the Temple of Learning. Arkad opens up an open-form debate with his students, asking the men if there is a reliable way to attract the goddess of good luck. And human nature being what it is, always looking for a shortcut, the very first place the crowd's mind goes is to gambling. They go straight to the gaming tables and the horse races.
Of course they do. Everyone wants to hit the jackpot. One guy immediately asked Arkad if the goddess whispered in his ear to bet on the gray horses from Nineveh the day before instead of the local bay horses. And a young man asks if anyone has found the goddess waiting at the gaming tables to miraculously turn the red side of the dice up.
Arkad uses cold, hard math to completely debunk the idea that the goddess of good luck frequents casinos or racetracks. He explains that the goddess is a deity of love and dignity who rewards the deserving. She does not hang around places where men consistently lose more than they win. He breaks down the gamekeeper's odds. If you bet on the dice cube, the red side pays 4-1, but there are 5 other losing sides. So every time you cast, you have 5 chances to lose and only 4 chances to win.
The house always wins.
Exactly. The game is mathematically rigged so that the gamekeeper always keeps 1/5 of all coins wagered over the long run. True luck, Arkad argues, is only found where the chances of profit are mathematically in the worker's favor, in legitimate business and trade, not at the betting tables.
So Arkad pivots the conversation. He asks the crowd for examples of good luck they almost had in the business world, but that escaped them. And we get 2 incredible, heart-wrenching stories about the sheer tragedy of procrastination.
These are painful to read.
They really are. The first is an elderly merchant who stands up, smoothing his fine white robes. He tells a story from when he was a young, newly married man. His father brought him a brilliant investment opportunity. The son of his father's friend was buying a barren tract of land outside the city walls. He was going to build 3 huge water wheels operated by oxen to irrigate the land, then subdivide it and sell it as fertile herb patches to city dwellers.
It was a visionary real estate development plan. Think of it like modern angel investing in a highly promising startup. The developer had a great plan, but he just needed 12 investors to commit to putting in 1/10 of their earnings to fund the project until it was ready. The merchant's father begged him to do it. He recognized it as a sure thing. He said, Opportunity stands before thee, my son. Today it is here, soon it is gone. Delay not.
But the young merchant hesitated. Why? Because the tradesman from the east had just brought in these beautiful, rich new robes. He and his wife desperately wanted them. If he committed his 10% to the water wheel project, they couldn't buy the robes. They wouldn't look wealthy in front of their friends. So he delayed. He put off the decision, telling his father he needed to think about it. And of course, the enterprise was wildly successful. The land was sold for a massive profit. And he missed out on incredible, life-changing wealth, all for a couple of Eastern robes that probably wore out in a year.
The second story is just as painful, and it highlights a different kind of hesitation. A middle-aged animal buyer tells the group about returning to the city late one evening after a long journey. He finds the massive city gates already locked for the night. While he's setting up his tent outside the walls, an elderly farmer approaches him in the dark.
The farmer is desperate.
Frantic. He has a flank of 900 sheep with him, but he just received word that his wife is desperately ill with a fever. He needs to sell the sheep immediately so he can mount a camel and rush back to his farm. Because of his panic and his need for immediate liquidity, the farmer offers the flock at a ridiculously low, highly profitable price.
It's the equivalent of a massive market correction today, where high-quality assets are suddenly on sale for pennies on the dollar because of panic selling. The buyer agrees to the price. It's a no-brainer. But then he calls his slaves to bring torches so he can count the 900 sheep to make sure he's getting exactly what he pays for. But it's pitch black, the sheep are thirsty, restless, and milling around in the dust. It's impossible to count them accurately. So the buyer tells the farmer, I will count them at daylight and pay you then.
The farmer pleads with him. He says, pay me but 2/3 of the price tonight so I can leave. I will leave my smartest slave here to help you count in the morning, and you can pay him the balance. He's offering an even better deal just to get going. But the buyer is stubborn. He wants absolute certainty. He refuses to hand over the money until morning when he can see everything perfectly. And what happens? The next morning, city gates open and 4 rival buyers rush out. The city is threatened with a siege and food is scarce. The rival buyers pay the farmer nearly 3 times the price for the sheep. The buyer's stubbornness, his need for perfect conditions, and his delay cost him an absolute fortune.
And this is where my favorite moment in the whole temple debate happens. There's a Syrian man in the crowd, and he stands up, waving his hand excitedly, struggling to find the exact right word in the Babylonian tongue. He says, "What is the word for the man who puts off doing those things that are mighty good for him?" Someone shouts out, "Procrastinator!" And the Syrian goes wild. He says, "Yes." He accepts not opportunity when she comes. He says, "I have much business right now. By and by I talk to you. Opportunity will not wait for such a slow fellow."
The Syrian perfectly diagnoses the disease that plagued both the merchant and the animal buyer. Procrastination is an internal enemy. The animal buyer admits that for years he thought his failure was due to poor judgment, and then he thought it was due to his stubbornness, until he finally recognized it for what it truly was. A habit of needless delaying where prompt, decisive action was required.
So, what does this all mean for us? How often does the goddess of good luck present you with a viable plan? A water wheel project, a flock of cheap sheep, a chance to invest in a down market, a chance to start that business you've been researching for years, only for your internal procrastinator to whisper, wait, you want the new robes instead. Or you want to count the sheep perfectly in the daylight because you're afraid of a little ambiguity. And while you wait for the perfect moment, the opportunity vanishes.
The takeaway Arkad delivers to the men of the Temple of Learning is absolute. Good luck is not magic. Good luck can be enticed, but it only follows opportunity. And opportunity requires immediate action. Men of action are favored by the goddess of good luck. If you conquer your procrastination, you will suddenly find yourself getting very, very lucky.
Okay, we've covered the cures, we've demystified luck, we've talked about budgets and compound interest and avoiding scams. Now we transition to the ultimate generational test of these laws. Do these mechanics, this wisdom, actually hold up when it is put into the fire of the real world by someone who didn't earn it firsthand? Does the theory survive reality? This brings us to Section 5, Wisdom versus Gold, the tale of Nomasir and the 5 laws.
We shift scenes here. We are out in the desert at night. A wealthy merchant named Kalabab is sitting by a fire with his heavily armed caravan guards, and he asks them a deeply philosophical question. A bag heavy with gold or a clay tablet carved with words of wisdom, if thou hadst thy choice, which wouldst thou choose?
And of course the guards all shout, "The gold! The gold!" Kalabab just smiles at their predictability. He compares them to the wild dogs howling out in the dark desert. He says if you feed the dogs, they eat, strut, and fight, giving no thought to tomorrow when they will be hungry again. If you give men the choice of gold and wisdom, they will ignore the wisdom and waste the gold, then cry when the gold is gone. To prove this point, Kalabab tells the story of Arkad's own son, Nomasir.
It was the custom in Babylon for the sons of wealthy fathers to just live with their parents and comfortably wait to inherit the estate. But Arkad, being the wise man he is, refuses to do this. He knows that unearned wealth destroys the recipient. He wants his son to be capable of managing and growing the estate. So when Nomasir reaches manhood, Arkad sends him away for a grueling 10-year test. He gives Nomasir exactly two things: a heavy bag of gold and a clay tablet with the 5 laws of gold carved into it.
The stakes are incredibly high here. Arkad tells Nomasir, "Go out into the world. If you return in 10 years, having proven you can acquire gold and earn the respect of men, you will inherit my estate. If you fail, I will give my entire estate to the priests. No safety net, no trust fund to fall back on." So Nomasir takes his gold, his slave, his horses, and the tablet wrapped in silk, and he heads to the distant city of Nineveh. And immediately, almost comically, things go terribly wrong.
It is a complete disaster. Nomasir later recounts his massive failure to his father. On the journey to Nineveh, he falls in with a caravan. 2 well-spoken, finely dressed men befriend him. They tell him about a wealthy man in Nineveh who owns an unbeatable white horse. But these men claim they have a horse that can easily beat it. They offer Nomasir the favor of joining them in a massive wager against the Nineveh man. Nomasir, feeling rich and overconfident with his father's bag of gold, is carried away by the thrill of an easy win.
And what happens?
Of course, the local horse crushes their horse. Nomasir loses a massive chunk of his father's gold. It was a complete scam. The men were partners with the Nineveh man and traveled with caravans specifically to find naive, wealthy victims to fleece.
So he falls for a get-rich-quick scheme on day one. But wait, it gets worse. Nomasir arrives in Nineveh, his pride wounded, and he befriends another young man from a wealthy family. This guy tells Nomasir that a local merchant has died, and they can buy his shop and his rich merchandise for a paltry price. He convinces Nomasir to put up his remaining gold to buy the stock, promising to bring his own gold later to run the venture together.
It's the classic bad business partnership. Nomasir doesn't know anything about retail or the local market in Nineveh. His friend delays bringing his own money, proves to be an incredibly foolish spender, and makes terrible buying decisions. The business rapidly deteriorates until they have unsaleable goods and no money left to pay their vendors. Nomasir has to kick the partner out and sacrifice what's left to a liquidator for pennies on the dollar. He is completely financially ruined. He sells his horses, he sells his slave, he sells his fine robes just to buy a bowl of porridge. Starvation is literally crouching at his door. He has failed the test.
And here's where it gets really interesting. In the absolute depths of his despair, starving in a foreign city, Nomasir suddenly remembers the clay tablet his father gave him, the tablet he hadn't even bothered to look at while his purse was full of gold. He unwraps the silk and he reads the words, and he is hit with a devastating realization. If he had sought the wisdom first, he wouldn't have lost the gold.
This is the turning point of his entire life. He reads the tablet and memorizes the 5 laws of gold. He stops looking for shortcuts. He secures a grueling manual labor job overseeing a crew of slaves building the new outer wall of Nineveh. It's backbreaking work, but this time he applies the laws. He saves a single copper from his meager wages. Then he saves the silver. He spends grudgingly, remembering how easily wealth can vanish. And eventually, the slave master, noticing his incredible thrift and discipline, approaches him with a real opportunity.
The master says, "Look, the outer wall will be finished in a year. The king is going to need massive bronze gates for the entrances to secure the city, but there's no metal in the city to cast them. If we pool our gold and send a caravan to buy copper and tin from the distant mines, we can sell it to the king at a rich price when the time comes. He will pay handsomely."
Now, Nomasir has a choice to make. But notice the difference here. This isn't a rigged horse race. This isn't a blind retail partnership with a foolish kid. This is a syndicate of experienced, hard-working men investing in a raw material with guaranteed future demand from a reliable buyer, the king. He evaluates the risk. He joins the pool. It is wildly successful. Because of his newly demonstrated wisdom, he gets invited into other legitimate ventures with these wise men. Over the remainder of his 10 years, he strictly follows the 5 laws, and his wealth absolutely explodes.
Let's really dig into these 5 laws right now, because they are the culmination of everything we've talked about today. Law number 1, gold comes gladly and increasing quantity to any man who will put by not less than 1/10 of his earnings to create an estate for his future and that of his family.
This is the bedrock. It's the exact same advice Algamish gave Arkad and Arkad gave the 100 men at the temple. If you consistently set aside 10%, you create a magnetic attraction for wealth. You build the capital required to seize opportunities.
Law number 2, gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the imperative to invest. Idle gold does nothing. It just leases value to inflation over time. It must be deployed into profitable channels where it can compound and multiply.
Law number 3, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invests it under the advice of men wise in its handling.
This is all about the protection of your principal and the humility of seeking mentorship. Nomasir learned this the hard way with the retail shop. The cautious owner seeks out the Algamishes of the world, the proven experts, before parting with a single coin.
Law number 4, gold slippeth away from the man who invests this in businesses or purposes with which he is not familiar or which are not approved by those skilled in its keep.
This law specifically warns against the Dunning-Kruger effect in investing that we discussed earlier. Just because you have gold doesn't mean you know how to run a retail business in Nineveh. If you aren't familiar with a field and you don't seek out experts who are, your gold will slip away into the hands of those who do understand the game.
And finally, law number 5, gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings, or who followeth the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or who trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires in investment.
The rigged horse race in Nineveh is the perfect example here. Fanciful propositions, get-rich-quick schemes, romantic desires of hitting a massive jackpot and becoming a millionaire overnight. Gold flees from these emotional, greedy impulses.
So, the 10 years pass. Nomasir's trial is over. He returns to his father's house in Babylon. A great feast is prepared. He stands before his parents in the dimly lit hall. And the climax of this story is just cinematic. Nomasir has his slave bring forward 3 heavy leather bags. He takes the first bag, places it on the floor before his father, and says, "You gave me a bag of Babylon gold. I return to you a bag of Nineveh gold of equal weight in equal exchange."
But he doesn't stop there.
No, this is the best part. He takes the other 2 bags of gold from his slave, drops them on the floor with a massive thud, and says, "You gave me a clay tablet inscribed with wisdom. Behold, in its stead I do return 2 bags of gold." He proves mathematically and physically to his father that the wisdom on the tablet was worth twice as much as the initial capital he was handed. Because without the wisdom, the gold was instantly lost. With the wisdom, he could generate endless bags of gold from nothing.
It is the ultimate validation of Arkad's teachings. Nomasir passed the test not by avoiding failure, he actually failed spectacularly, but by using the wisdom to recover from that catastrophic failure, change his behavior, and build enduring generational wealth.
Wow. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We started with Bansir sitting on the wall, sweating and feeling deeply sorry for himself because he worked so hard but didn't understand why he was still broke. We moved to Arkad, carving clay tablets in the middle of the night to learn the secret of paying himself first. We saw the king's decree and broke down the 7 mechanical cures for a lean purse, from battling lifestyle creep to buying a home. We've demystified luck, learning that the goddess only favors men of action who defeat their inner procrastinator. And we ended with Nomasir's ultimate triumph, proving that seeking wisdom must always, always come before seeking returns.
When you distill it all down, it boils down to discipline, continuous self-education, and the courage to act decisively when opportunity presents itself.
And I want to remind you, the person listening right now, we've talked a lot about chariots, liars, egg merchants, and bronze gates today. But strip all the ancient set dressing away, and the fundamental laws of money haven't changed one bit in 6,000 years. If your purse is lean today, the cures are exactly the same. Pay yourself first. Live on less than you earn. Make your money work for you through compounding. Protect your principal from scams. Own your home. Ensure your future. And increase your ability to earn by increasing your skills.
The mechanics are universal. The only variable in the equation is whether you will choose to apply them to your own life.
Which brings us to our final thought for the day. You've been handed the proverbial bag of gold and the clay tablet today. You now know the 5 laws. But I want to leave you with a question to mull over long after this audio ends. Think about the animal buyer standing outside the locked gates of the city in the dark, hesitating to buy the flock of sheep because he wanted perfect conditions. What is your personal flock of 900 sheep in the dark? What opportunity is standing right outside your gates right now, offering you a massive advantage, just waiting for you to conquer your inner procrastinator and take decisive action?
Don't wait for the daylight when the opportunity is gone.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey to ancient Babylon. Keep learning, keep growing, and start fattening that purse today. We'll see you on the next deep dive.